Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to picture a really familiar scenario. It's late at night and you're walking into a dark room in your house. What happens? Well, without even thinking about it, your hand just immediately reaches out for the light switch.
But here's the crazy part. Before your conscious mind even finishes the thought of finding that switch, your heart is already beating faster. You can literally stand there in your own home and tell yourself that you are perfectly safe, but your body, it simply doesn't believe you. A visceral, totally involuntary reaction takes over long before your logical brain can even process what's happening.
So, that brings us to the crucial question. Why? Why are you, a perfectly rational person standing in a totally secure building, actually afraid of the dark? Well, it turns out the answer is far stranger and way more ancient than just some childish fear of shadows.
Section 1. You were the prey. Anthropologist Donna Hart's discovery.
To truly understand this fear, we really have to go back in time. You see, your brain wasn't built for a world with modern streetlights and deadbolts. It was built for a world where the dark was absolutely packed with predators. Anthropologist Donna Hart spent years studying the fossilized bones of our early human ancestors in South African caves. Now, if she had found what we call scavenging marks, it would just mean our ancestors were eaten after they'd already died. But that's not what she found. She found killing marks that perfectly matched the teeth of large prehistoric cats. Let that sink in. We weren't just scavenging out there on the savannah. We were constantly on the menu.
And because of that relentless, day-in and day-out danger, natural selection made a pretty brutal choice. It decided to reward survival, not accuracy. Just think about what that kind of intense pressure does to a species over millions of years. Every single individual who froze at the wrong moment, or maybe ignored a tiny little shift in the tall grass, they simply didn't survive to pass on their genes. The nervous systems that did survive, the exact ones we inherited, were hyper-tuned to treat absolutely any uncertainty as an immediate life-or-death danger.
Section 2. The brain's low road, mapping the fear circuitry.
So how exactly does this ancient survival pressure physically wire the brain that's sitting inside your head right now? Psychologist Joseph Ledoux actually spent decades mapping this whole thing out, and he discovered two very distinct pathways. One is what he calls the high road. This pathway runs straight through your cortex. It's your conscious mind where information gets meticulously fact-checked. It's logical, sure, but it is incredibly slow. But then there's the low road. This pathway completely skips logic. It runs straight from your senses directly to your amygdala, which is basically the brain's internal alarm system, and it triggers fear in milliseconds, based purely on a vague shape or a sudden sound. It's the reason you jump at that shadow behind your couch at 2 a.m. long before your logical brain has any clue what's going on.
Section 3. The evolutionary math. The asymmetry of fear.
Now you might be wondering, why on earth would evolution build a system that is just so reckless and completely ignores logic? Well, it all comes down to the wildly asymmetric evolutionary math that our ancestors lived inside. Think about the cost of a false alarm. You hear a rustle, you completely panic, but it turns out it's only the wind. What happens? You lose a few seconds of calm. No big deal. But now contrast that with the cost of a missed predator. You hear a rustle, you logically assume it's the wind, but it's actually a leopard. You lose your life. There are 0 second chances. So a nervous system that constantly overreacts to shadows is always going to outlive one that patiently waits for logical proof.
Section 4. The landscape of fear, ecology and behavior.
In ecology, there's this absolutely fascinating term called the landscape of fear. Basically, it describes how the mere presence of a predator completely alters the behavior of an entire environment. For example, elk will fundamentally change their grazing patterns the exact moment wolves return to a region. Zebras will approach rivers with extreme caution if they know crocodiles are present. And honestly, the human parallels are totally identical. Instead of scanning open grassland, we scan a dark, empty hallway. Instead of watching a tree line for movement, we watch a stranger's hands on a dark street. We've just swapped out the train, but that ancient circuitry, it remains exactly the same.
Here's the core of it. Darkness itself doesn't actually create danger. What it does is it completely removes your ability to rule danger out. Because vision was our ancestors' absolute primary defense, a brain built by millions of years of predation does not handle "I cannot see" very well at all. It just immediately defaults to extreme caution. And you know, it's not even just about the dark. Silence was often the very first warning sign. Have you ever sat in an unnaturally quiet room and felt your anxiety just inexplicably spike? There's a reason for that. In the ancient forest, birds and insects would completely stop making noise whenever a predator moved through an area. Silence literally meant something was actively hunting.
So when things get a little too quiet today, a very, very old part of you still sits right up and pays attention.
Section 5. The Smoke Detector Principle. Reframing Anxiety with Randolph Nesse.
Now, if you're feeling a bit on edge thinking about all this, evolutionary medicine founder Randolph Nesse offers a really brilliant way to reframe it. He calls it the smoke detector principle. It's this evolutionary concept where a defense mechanism triggers frequent false alarms simply because the cost of being annoyed is tiny compared to the fatal cost of missing a real threat. Think about a literal physical smoke detector in your kitchen. It goes off when you burn a piece of toast because it is calibrated purely for survival, not perfect accuracy. Well, your fear response operates under that exact same logic.
1,000. Literally, your brain would happily interrupt your piece 1,000 times for a creepy shadow that turns out to just be a coat hanging on a hook, rather than fail you that one single critical time when it truly matters.
Section 6. An Ancient Inheritance. Hearing the Echo.
So, the next time you feel that sudden jolt of unease walking to your car in a dark parking lot, I want you to remember this. It isn't a malfunction. It's actually a direct echo from your highly successful ancestors. Because this evolutionary mismatch is really the whole story. Modern life has removed almost all the actual predators, but it hasn't removed the wiring built to detect them. We are basically walking around with this incredibly patient, outdated survival mechanism still standing guard for a dangerous world that just doesn't exist anymore.
Tonight, you will walk into a dark room and your hand will find the light switch. And now you will know exactly whose hand is really moving. It's such an awe-inspiring realization, isn't it? Your nervous system isn't broken. It's a wildly successful piece of ancient technology that kept your ancestors alive long enough to pass it right down to you. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. What other ancient instincts are still quietly guiding your daily decisions without you even realizing it? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you see the dark forever.